Grey's Anatomy, the most iconic binge-worthy drama, is back, along with answers to the biggest cliffhangers. Will Teddy survive? Will Joe and Link finally find happiness together? Meredith returns along with fan faves like Arizona. You can now stream every episode of Grey's ever on Hulu, and new episodes next day. Watch new episodes of Grey's Anatomy Thursdays at 9/8 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Today on CityCast Chicago. If you've heard us say it once, you've heard us say it a whole bunch on this show. If you've got a problem like a pothole on your street, rats in your alley, a landlord who won't fix your back stairs, call 311 or even your alder's office. But while complaining might or might not get your problem solved, a new advisory from the Inspector General's office suggests Chicago could be doing a whole lot better at providing services. So I've got Inspector General Deborah Witzberg here to explain how and talk about all that goes into being the city's top watchdog. It's Monday, March 18th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is What Chicago's Talking About. Deborah, welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, in this advisory, you're talking about reactive and proactive service delivery. What does that mean, and what's the difference between the two?
Reactive service provision is exactly the kind you just described, where someone makes a complaint to the city, usually by calling 311, to say that they have a problem in their neighborhood and they need city services. But this advisory is a product of the fact that we noticed over time, over a handful of different projects, that the city is really focused on that kind of reactive service provision at the expense of proactive and strategic planning around service provision. So we're kind of responding to problems, but we're not taking steps to proactively avoid problems that are coming. So one example that we mention in the advisory has to do with tree trimming by the Department of Streets and Sanitation, where for many years, with the advent of 311, Streets and Sanitation was doing reactive service provision for tree trimming. Somebody would call 311 and say, there's a tree in my parkway and it needs to get trimmed, and they'd come out and trim it. We recommended that they move to a proactive approach, which was basically a grid system. Mm-hmm. And they did so, and as a result, have been hugely more efficient and effective. Many, many, many more trees have been trimmed as a result of taking that approach.
A lot of it sounds like sort of taking the responsibility back off of sort of the Chicagoan and putting it back on the city of Chicago.
So I think that's a critically important point, and that's kind of where the equity question comes up here. It's, I think, well understood, and the city has acknowledged that some Chicagoans in some neighborhoods are more inclined to call 311 than others. Neighborhoods where city services have been underprovided, they've been underprovided. Mm-hmm. And that has sort of a cyclical effect, right? So people are getting lower quality city services. They are, I think, likely less inclined to make complaints. And then if all we're doing is city service provision in response to those complaints, then they don't get city service provision.
Right.
And so by taking a proactive, risk-based approach, the city can blunt some of those inequities in the provision of city services.
Mm-hmm. You talk about inequities. What are some other issues that arise when you focus too much on reactive services?
This advisory doesn't reflect any new research. This is like a sort of collection of observations we made across projects across about 10 years. And we've taken recently to sending this sort of advisory when we identify sort of a trend across city services, across city programs, where we find a common thread and we raise those to say, this isn't a dozen little problems, this is one big problem.
Yeah.
So some of the examples we provide here, many of these have health and safety aspects. So we talk about, for example, building inspections. And the fact that the city does many building inspections in response to complaints, but does not do enough of the proactive risk-based inspections that it is supposed to do. Same thing with food safety inspections, same thing with other similar programs. Any program which is designed to identify risk and mitigate it before something goes wrong, that should be a proactive approach. That's how that's designed.
Because it should be happening on a at least calendar basis, every 6 months, every year, things like that. But if you're responding purely in a reactive sense, you get situations like we had over the last few years where buildings that had multiple failed building inspections, multiple complaints from tenants, multiple fines, then found themselves going up in flames, catching on fire. But there was a paper trail to say, why didn't we do more here? Why didn't we address this more? Why didn't we hold these property owners accountable sooner?
Yeah, that's right. And, to be clear, there's no expectation here. I don't have any expectation that the city would have a crystal ball. We can't do service provision by magic 8-ball. But this is about minimizing risk, managing risk. And so, again, the point here is really not that we should switch from doing just reactive work to just proactive work, but that we should be doing both.
Reestablish that balance.
That's right. Exactly. So we sent this advisory to the mayor's office, and they sent a response, which we publish along with the report. And I think it's really worth noting that in that response, the mayor's office agrees with the fundamental observation here, which is that a balance between these approaches is necessary and appropriate. And they identify a number of places, a number of city programs which are oriented in a proactive way. I think that's really good news. It's really good news both that the city agrees with the premise here and that there are places in city government where this is coming into practice.
While most Chicagoans won't, by the end of this, memorize every department, but if you have a better sense that like streets and sand is connected to the work to, rid the city of rats or lessen the number of rats, or the dangers that they cause, or CDPH is involved with new parent support or coordinating systems to address opioid use. If we could just start to make these broader connections for people having the conversation more, it might just be more helpful for people to have a better sense of, how the chain of command in the city works.
That's absolutely right. And we do a lot of work that is pointed in exactly that direction. We do a lot of sort of explainer work, transparency work that is just designed to help Chicagoans better understand how city government works. Mm-hmm. Because I totally agree with you. We would all be better served by a government which was more visible to the residents.
Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you, Inspector General. I didn't think the first time we be talking on the show, a little digital face-to-face, would be about 311. Your office is more often in the news talking about major investigations into corruption or police misconduct. So can you explain a little and remind CityCast just what all does Chicago Inspector General do? Because if I tried to make a list of the top 5, 311 and sort of providing analysis on the benefits, the pros and cons, probably wouldn't have been in my top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about ourselves is my favorite thing, so I'd be happy to. The Office of Inspector General is a nonpartisan, independent watchdog agency in city government, and it is our mission to promote economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in the operation of city government.
Come on, definition. Come on. Straight out the book. That was fire.
So we do that in 3 ways. I sort of think of our work in 3 channels. The first of those are misconduct investigations. That's the kind of thing you talked about. So when somebody breaks the rules, either administrative rules or criminal laws, we investigate those bad actors to hold them accountable. That's kind of the first channel of work. The second is our program and policy work, where we look at programs and operations of city government to see whether they could be working more effectively, more efficiently, more equitably. Can we make recommendations to just improve the way things work?
Okay,
And
so
then
311 fits right in that sort
that's
of
right,
tenet.
where we're
Got
making
it.
recommendations to make these things work better.
Got
And
it.
then the third channel is one that we just talked a little bit about. That's transparency work. That work is just motivated by the idea that information about Chicago belongs to Chicagoans. And so when we do these explainer products, when we work on the data dashboards on our information portal, that's just an exercise in sort of shining light into the windowless rooms in city government so that for all the reasons that you have said, people have a better view into how Chicago government works.
All right, here's the big question a lot of people want to know. Do these investigations actually lead to change?
I think that they do. I think doing this work requires a certain optimism, which I, as a Red Sox fan in the 80s and 90s, come by honestly.
Oh, we forgive you.
I appreciate that.
Was there a twinge of frustration in your voice, though? Maybe I'm reaching. I just had to check. Because there seemed to be a slight pause in there where you go, yeah, I wish we had a little more teeth. I wish we could do a little more rabble rousing or something. It just was there a pause in there, or am I reaching?
Not a lack of rabble rousing. That's we do plenty of that. Look, I mean, I think it's important not to be naive about the fact that these are not light switch solutions. We are not going to fix government in the city of Chicago overnight. Chicago operates at a tremendous deficit of legitimacy with its residents, and that is a very, very long arc. For generations, the city has given Chicagoans no reason to trust the operation of government. That's not something that we turn around in a news cycle or a term or a career, probably. That's a really long arc. But I do think that we are bending it back. I do think that we are doing work that kind of pays down that deficit of legitimacy, one thing at a time.
And so beyond putting out great investigations and great reports and great suggestions, what are those mechanisms that allow you to see them through implementation? Or do you finish an investigation, put out that, and then maybe move on to the next one and kind of start that process again? Because, I mean, again, this 311 report, but you're looking at, years and years of data. I know that takes time.
Yeah. They all take time, and it's challenging because there's an infinite amount to do. We're never going to do everything that needs doing. And so every decision we make is a prioritization decision. Everything we do means that we don't work on something else. And so how we go about making those prioritization decisions is critically important. The way I try to think about that is, again, back to this idea of sort of the deficit of legitimacy at which the city operates. We try to prioritize our work so that we're devoting resources to those things which most contribute to that deficit. Sometimes that's big dollar amount items. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the sort of more ordinary day-to-day interactions that people have with city government which go badly. The example that I always think of here is, if people are getting a building inspection on their house and they have an inspector who solicits a $50 bribe, that's not a big dollar amount, but that's a Chicagoan who leaves an interaction with city government believing there to be no legitimacy in the operation of city government, right? That really matters to people. So in our misconduct investigations that we talked about, if we're doing an administrative investigation and we find that somebody has broken the rules, we either seek to have them punished in their jobs, suspended or fired, or in ethics cases, in cases where people have broken the ethics rules, we seek to have them fined. And in criminal cases, people get charged.
Is that simply sort of bringing these complaints to the right authority? Like, for example, their boss or, the criminal legal system? Like, how does that move? Or is it up to those institutions to find the reports or to go through their email and say, here's the...
Oh no, we're not all that quiet about it when we find something that has gone wrong. So if we're doing an administrative investigation, if we find that somebody has either broken a rule or violated the ethics ordinance, then we sustain allegations and we send those allegations. We send a report of our investigation with that information to the appropriate authority, and that's all laid out in the municipal code who that authority is. If it's a department, if it's a rule that has been violated, it's the head of the department for which the person works. If it's an ethics rule, then it's the Board of Ethics. And so we would send a communication to the appropriate authority that says, we, OIG, have found that this person broke the rules. We believe you should punish them. We recommend that you punish them accordingly. And then this is the sort of like public shaming approach to oversight. So we make that recommendation. And
I love us just calling it what it is.
Well, it's not actually what we name it in the quarterly reports, but you get the idea.
It's the dragging section.
And then that city department or the Board of Ethics responds to us. And then we publish a summary of that information. We don't include anybody's names, but we publish a summary of what we found and what we recommended and whether our recommendations were followed.
Okay.
For criminal investigations, those are in some ways a little bit more straightforward. Those look a little bit more familiar, where if we are investigating a city actor for violating the law, for committing a crime, then we partner with a prosecutor's office, sometimes the state's attorney's office, which is my alma mater. Sometimes
I was going to say, you've spent time there.
That's right, home sweet home. Sometimes the Attorney General's office, sometimes the U.S. Attorney's office, and those people get charged with crimes as appropriate.
In your 2 years since you've taken over as IG, you have seen one mayor, given the city boot, one mayor now positioned in the hot seat. But what's been your biggest challenge? Because I imagine in an election year that complicates things. You have a whole new administration coming in. What have been your biggest challenges so far?
All of that is complicated, although I will say OIG is built for both structural and operational independence. That's kind of the hallmark of IG work, is that independence. And so there were some challenges associated with the fact that the transition at the beginning of my term in this job was very lengthy and candidly very messy. And that was a real challenge for a long time at the beginning of my term, was to sort of get the house in order. So that we could kind of get back to cruising altitude, get back to doing our work. That was a real challenge. We addressed the kind of transition, and my hope is that going forward, that transition will be more orderly to avoid that kind of mess associated with the transition. So that was one set of challenges. I also think that there really are challenges associated with Chicago's reputation with Chicagoans. The fact that the Chicago way is a proper noun and not in a good way, that's a hard place to come from in the business of government legitimacy.
Yeah, it is just assumed that it is illegitimate, naturally, that it is built into the system as is. So I imagine when you make a recommendation and it runs into that Chicago way, people do not have the political will to see it through. That can be frustrating. Do you have an investigation or a recommendation that obviously you want to see every investigation, people follow through, recommendations implemented, but is there one in your first 2 years that you're really pushing, like pay attention to this, follow these recommendations, or at least start to have real conversations about this?
Oh, I love all of our recommendations the same.
Pick a favorite kid.
No, that's not. Don't tell my children. No, I think, I spent a lot of my time in this office before I was in this job doing our police oversight work. And as a former prosecutor, my heart is very much in our public safety reform work. And one of the sets of recommendations that has come out of our public safety section that is, I think, very critical to the city and very near and dear to my heart had to do with the Chicago Police Department's enforcement of the rules against lying. CPD has a rule on the books which says that CPD members are not allowed to lie. And the kind of public-facing position of the city and the department is that if CPD members are found to have lied, then they should be fired. Then they're not fit to serve as police officers. But the fact of the matter is that is not really how enforcement of that rule has played out. And I worry about that tremendously from at least two angles. One, again, as somebody who has practiced law in the criminal justice system in Cook County, I think that the under-enforcement of, it's called Rule 14, the rule against lying, the under-enforcement of Rule 14 is a sort of existential threat to the administration of justice in Cook County. I also think, as a Chicagoan and as somebody who knows and admires a lot of people who wear the uniform of the Chicago Police Department, I think we cannot ask people to trust a police department that lets its members get away with lying. Mm-hmm. So that one...
Because that's a slippery slope towards what we're seeing now, where city council is about to pay out another, $17 million for torture-related cases?
I don't know if it's a slippery slope or if it's an in-progress avalanche. I mean, I think, yes, that's right. It is both the human and the dollar costs associated with the under-enforcement of that rule are tremendous.
Yeah. So we've walked through this process again of you put out an investigation, you send the appropriate recommendations. For an example like this, before we get out of here, right? You're trying to continue to follow up on it. What steps are available? You've made those recommendations. We're doing the public shaming right now. Are there any other tools available to us as Chicagoans or inside of the Inspector General's office to help when these reports do come down?
Well, what we will do, what we do in other cases, and what we will do with that project is that we get commitments from the city, and in that case from CPD, about how they will respond to our recommendations. And then some period of time later, usually about a year, but it depends a little bit, we go back. We'll go back to CPD and we'll say, well, did you do the things that you said you were going to do? And they're required by law to answer those questions, to provide status updates, and then we'll publish those results again. And we will keep at it until we kind of get to a place where where we've made some progress. I repeat this all the time, sort of like shamelessly stealing this very wise thing. But Ida B. Wells said that if you want to right wrongs, then shine the light of truth upon them. That's what this work is about. We are shining the light of truth upon things that are going wrong in city government.
Well, I want to give you a huge thank you for being here, Inspector General Deborah Witzberg. Thank you for making time for CityCast Chicago.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Before I let you go, to stay tapped into the latest headlines and some of the coolest events happening in the city this week, head over to our website, chicago.citycast.fm. While you're there, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Hey, today I have some very, very special good news for you. Today we're celebrating the 3-year anniversary of CityCast Chicago and Hey Chicago. And I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you to everyone who has contributed to this beautiful show of ours, to all of our guests, producers, listeners, all the moms out there who have supported us. It truly means everything to the entire team. Now, the best way to celebrate us, besides going to membership.citycast.fm and becoming a member, is being here bright and early tomorrow. We'll be in your inbox and feeds, and we'll talk to you then. Peace. Oh, hitting my desk. Simone's going to be like, start that sentence over.